Hey everyone, Works here. So we're back with another of our Mythic Plus Season 1 dungeon guides. Today it is Windrunner Spire. From a lore perspective, I think this is going to be one of the most intriguing dungeons for a lot of lore-based players. Obviously, the Windrunner sisters are among the most popular characters in World of Warcraft's history, so anything that dives into the history of the Windrunner sisters is always going to be popular amongst those that care about it. Now, this expansion, we are going to explore Windrunner Spire, the ancient home of the Windrunner sisters. And from a dungeon perspective, I think this dungeon has gotten a lot of changes throughout the course of the beta cycle that I think is going to make it mechanically not the most difficult dungeon, but the navigation of this dungeon is quite difficult if you don't know where you're going and you get lost and things like that. And it's just going to lead to situations where you're just kind of in a really tough position navigating this dungeon. Now, after you do it a couple of times, it'll become natural, but the first few times I think some people are going to be in here, it's going to be really hard. And routing as a result in this dungeon is also going to be difficult. Now, this dungeon, much like Nexus Point Zenith, is going to be a dungeon where you actually can choose a couple of different pathways in order to go there. So the pull count and the pull order that I have here is not necessarily going to reflect the specific route, especially if you decide coming in off the dungeon, you can go north to go fight Emberdawn first, or you can come south and come down here and fight things like Sunlash, or come grab the Derelict Duo second. Sunlash is in Magistr's Terrace. Sorry, you can either come grab the Derelict Duo, or you can go do Emberdawn first, and then after that, you usually will end up going to Kralik and then Restless Heart. So your first two bosses, you can pick which route you want to go, but you do have to get both of them in order to do that. And then depending on which way you go, this room right down here will depend. If you come in on the top side, this will be because you did Emberdawn second. If you come in on this bottom side, it's because you did Derelict Duo second in order to get to Kralik, and then of course the Restless Heart. So let's talk about this dungeon and some of the major trash mobs, because there's a lot of trash in this dungeon that I think is going to be quite deadly. So the first thing that I want to point out is the stewards here. They do the Spirit Bolt cast that's going to inflict a lot, and they do the Soul Torment that's going to be doing rot damage to your characters all the way through. You want to make sure that you're kicking that. You also have this Spellguard Magus, who's going to basically give them a protective bubble, and it reduces damage done to all the allies within the bubble by 99%. So your tank is going to make sure you pull this out. And they have this Arcane Salvo that just channels this salvo into a single player, and it hurts. It hurts a lot. Even on a 10 at the gear we had on beta, it was destroying our DPS if we didn't kick it. So this is your number one kick, is this Arcane Salvo, with the Restless Steward Spirit Bolt being the second one. And then the Groundskeepers are just your standard melee mobs. But you will end up clearing this whole room because you're going to be coming in here once or twice, so you might as well just clear it now. Now, like I said, you have the choice to go north or south after this, depending on what you want to do. I'm going to go north, where we have another Restless Steward pack, and that's going to take us over to this platform here, where we have more Restless Stewards, but then we have this Territorial Dragonhawk, which has a Fire Spit, which is a channeled cast. And then you have the Bolstering Flames, which means they're basically going to absorb some damage and increased hastes. Again, Spell Steal or Purge or Trank Shot Dispel can get rid of this, so be mindful of that. But you'll make sure that you kick this Fire Spit as much as you can. And then we get into the spider wing aspect of this. So these creeping spindle webs are just your standard poison spray, acid demise with melee attack stuff. So like, it's going to, when it dies, you're going to want to move away from this, because it basically like puts a stink cloud in the air that will deal damage. And then poison spray is just going to go out with a big dot every now and then on this. Now, these little hatchlings are the worst, because when they die, they are going to leave an acid puddle on the ground that lasts for like, I think it's 10 or 12 seconds after they die. And if you're standing within it, obviously you're going to take damage. So as you're navigating this kind of tight space right through here, you're going to want to make sure that you're kind of pulling these mobs off to the side and then killing them. That way your group has, like, you want to come down like one side, so that way your ranged and your healers have room to go, and then your melee can also have space to kind of strafe along the side here as you're killing these mobs. And your tank, you're going to want to kind of walk backwards through this area. You're then going to head up the stairs, where you're going to end up, or head downstairs rather. These are going to be going down, where you're going to fight more of these spindle webs, and these spider hatchlings and stuff like that. And then you're going to get into another pack with stewards, groundskeepers, and spiderwebs. So you're going to have a kick now added to this, plus all the poison stuff. And then because there's only one exit on this door, you're going to try to grab these trappers with this apex links, which will leap to people, and 2 of these hatchlings. You want to try to avoid these if you can. If you pull them, you're just going to go over count. These pesty lashlings, as you go out, have this spore charged. It just gives everything a dot that's going to do additional nature damage, so you want to be mindful of that. Then you're going to pull lashlings with these groundskeepers, and then this right here, this bloated lasher, has a fungal bolt, which you're going to want to kick, and then the spore dispersal, which I don't think you can kick this, so it just does it. But what it does is that when he does it, it'll wake up all these pesty lashlings and empower them to where they're doing more damage if they get spore charged. So there's a couple of ways to handle this mob. You can either just pull it on top of these lashlings and really do mass AoE and try to kill them quickly, or you try to kill this solo and then pull these things afterwards. You're then going to hit this territorial dragonhawk, which again does the fire spit like the ones earlier did, and that'll lead us into our first boss of Emberdawn. Now Emberdawn is a giant dragonhawk. There'll be a little bit of RP, so you have a chance for like your healer to drink up and stuff like that. But this boss I think is pretty straightforward, and as you'll see from the footage that we have here. So as you can see, as we pull it, it gets pulled by the warlock by accident here. But I go ahead and pull this mob off to the edge, because whenever you're in doubt, you can pull a mob to the edge. Now there's a reason for this, and it's because of the searing beak that's coming out. This is your tank buster ability, so you just want to make sure that you have your mitigation up if you're a tank player. But you see the 2 DPS that get these circles around them. They take him to the edge because they leave the fire patches behind, and they leave behind like these wind tornadoes. Burning Gate, obviously a big frontal, that points in random directions or targets a player where they're standing and goes from there. So you just want to make sure that you're avoiding this while these wind tornadoes are going around, moving you around the entire arena. So this is much like the wind gust on Croth inside Algathar Academy. Very similar mechanics. So you handle it like the way you handle the other one. Now you can see I'm trying to keep this mob as close to the center as I can, or really what I should have been doing is I should have moved it over to the right a little bit where we already had flame patches down so that we could slowly fill this room up one side to the other. But that's really this fight. Manage your flame patches, don't put them in the middle of the room. You want to move them off to the side as much as humanly possible. And as a tank, you can help your DPS by positioning things accordingly, and you just kind of gently move. And then when he leaps to the center and does the Burning Gate, along with the flaming air draft and stuff like that, you'll be able to just kind of manage it, no issues at all. The big thing that's going to get people in this fight is A, space on not being handled well, but B, these tornadoes. So these tornadoes, if you get hit by them, are going to do a fire damage dot. As you can see, one of our DPS gets caught in them. They spin them around and stun them for 2 seconds before throwing them in a random direction. So you want to make sure that you're avoiding these. So as a caster, you're going to have to position accordingly and kind of pre-plan your casting, kind of be able to accurately judge if you can get a cast off before you have to move. As someone that plays a lot of Devastation Evoker, I know that I'll be using things like hover charges to be able to channel Disintegrate while on the move and not lose out on damage. But Emberdawn, very straightforward. Manage the circles, manage the wind tornadoes. As a tank, watch the Searing Blaze, and you're going to be able to move on quickly. Now you can see towards the end of this, we click this little gate, and it's going to take us back to the beginning of the dungeon. And that's when you start heading south on our path here. So you get the Restless Steward, and it's going to bring you to this point here where you're going to want to grab these Fervent Apothecaries and those Windrunner Soldiers, and then this Devoted Woe Bringer. You may end up getting this group, but if you pull it smart, you can do it. So let's talk about the Apothecaries. So they have a File Toss, which is an instant cast. It just basically want to make it so that you want to do a loose spread. You don't want to stack up all your range during your melee as best as possible because it's going to do damage. And then the Shattered File basically makes it so that any player standing inside that circle is going to deal nature damage. So one of the things that you might want to do is pull this pack back here, and then work your way in this way, slowly but surely. Now, at this point, there technically is an option where you can come down this path here and come grab Commander Kralik. I haven't tested the route to see if it's faster. It would take you here, where you then pull all this and go there. But for our purposes of this video, we're going to skip that and we'll come back to it later. The Devoted Woebringer does a Shadow Bolt along with a Pulsing Shriek. It basically makes it so that prevents silencing effects, so she cannot be kicked out of this while she's pulsing it. but it is an absorb. So as long as the absorb shield is up, she will do this pulsing shriek. So you want to make sure that you just kick that or burn that shield as fast as you can. Other than that, these reavers and the cutthroats are not all that important. The cutthroats do have a kick option on them with poison blades. So if you can kick that to prevent them from inflicting additional nature damage when they shadow arrive, then that's useful. But if you're smart about it or you have good timing, you can just kind of ignore it and either dispel the dot if you have a poison dispel, or just defensive it if you really feel like you're in trouble. Or if your healer's good enough and has a throughput, you just deal with it. You grab this next pack, which has the cutthroats and apothecaries back into this, and then you will go up the stairs where you'll run into more cutthroats and apothecaries and Willbringers. And again, this has one exit, so you're just going to pull all of this stuff. And that'll bring us to the Derelict Duo. Derelict Duo, I think, is a boss the first time you do it. If you don't know what you're doing, it's going to cause problems for you. But that's what this video is for. So what we're going to do with the Derelict Duo is there's a couple of different bosses that you'll find familiar mechanics to, just painted in a different color. The most important one really is the fact that these bosses, much like the duo boss in Floodgate, do have separate health pools, so you need to try and kill them roughly at the same time in order to prevent an enrage effect. You'll notice there's a Surgeon Stitchflesh mechanic with a hook that we have to play with, and there's a lot of space denial on the floor. So let's go ahead and grab the footage here. And you can see that as we get ready to pull and I get ready to pull these mobs, we're kind of laying out quickly what to do with this to my group here. When we pull them, I just kind of keep them where they are with Latch and Callus. So Callus has a cast that you'll need to kick, so someone will need to be assigned or do a kick rotation on that. And you can see you can get targeted by this, and we see all immediately we go to the edge because it leaves behind these puddles. So much like Emberhawk with the flame circles, you're seeing another one here where you just got to place this stuff where you're not going to kind of screw yourself. Now, the good thing is this entire outer ring area, you can technically play with it and you won't reset the boss unless you go into the inside ring where you were killing trash. Now, this dark entity gets popped up. You do want to make sure, like I'm trying to get it killed here because it has the Curse of Darkness, but really you just kind of let it go and whoever has it just kites it away. And you can see we fill up the initial circle area, and then I'm going to work on trying to position this boss accordingly. I think we're going to go back and left from where you're viewing it at now. Now here we get targeted with Heaving Yank, and as you can see, Callus teleports away, and I go jump behind her, and guess what happens? Whoop! Much like Surgeon Stitchflesh, you grab it, and you interrupt Callus's cast, which does not get interrupted unless it's grabbed by the hook. So you can see combination of a few different bosses that you're playing with here, and you can see we're doing a really good job of keeping these roughly centered. Now, here we kind of see that like our positioning does bad, so I kind of on the fly adjust and decide, okay, we're going to go this way with it. And go from there. Now, Callus's jump that she does for when you hook, I think it targets a player and goes to their location, is what it looks like. So there is a way to kind of manipulate this a little bit if you play in a little bit of a tighter setup. But I haven't done this dungeon enough to know if that's for certain. If someone does know if Callus either targets a player or targets a random location, please put it in the comments below. I'd love to share that knowledge so that we're all better prepared for this dungeon. But this is another boss that kind of goes down. As you can see, we kill Callus first, and Latch enrages and just hammers. Now, luckily, I didn't. I had all sorts of mitigation cooldowns up. Wasn't a big deal. Now, you can see when you take this mirror here, it will actually start to send you back down to the main room where we didn't kill anything, so that we can then travel back and go down that path that I mentioned earlier so that we can get to Commander Kralik. Now, the path that we take has us coming in on the south side, where the major mobs are going to be these archers that are very hard to move, but do cast a arrow rain ability that you just have to move out of. The Phalanx Breakers have this interrupting screech, which if you're casting when it goes off, you will need to make sure that you are not casting. Goes off there, and then Break Ranks basically charges a player and knocks them up. So they're just kind of annoying, typical Beastmaster Hunter, or like, you know, beastie pet type characters on these Phalanx Breakers. The Windrunner Soldiers, your stereotypical mobs. So you'll fight a couple of these packs as you go through. As you get to this pull here with these Lingering Marauders and this Haunting Grunt, this Axe Thrower is the one that I want to highlight the most because it's also very hard to move this guy. So you're going to want to make sure that you're wherever this guy goes, because it does jump around much like the Groundskeepers in Halls of Atonement do. Or not the Groundskeepers, the guys that enrage the Gargants, the Loyal Beast cast. They jump around. These Axe Throwers do the same, so you kind of want to always make sure you're doing that. These loyal wargs shred flesh. They just do a physical dot and a damage absorbs. Just be ready to heal that off of these haunting grunts. And then the Phantasmal Mystic is the other major mob. It has a Bloodlust cast, so it increases their haste. So again, I think this could be spell stolen, but I also believe that it can be purged or tranked, since it's considered a haste effect. You want to obviously kick the Chain Lightning because that's lots of damage. And then Flame Nova is something that I don't think we have the ability to interrupt, if I recall correctly. I'll have to check the footage, but you just want to make sure that other than your tank, you kind of want to make sure you're getting out of this if you can. And you have 2 of these that you'll face going into the last boss, which is Commander Kralik. Now, Commander Kralik is, I think is actually the most fun boss in this dungeon. I love Commander Kralik. I find this boss incredibly fun. So he's pretty straightforward, but has some really, to me, I think, fun mechanics. He's a boss that is going to potentially give groups fits, but the groups that know how to handle him, I think, are going to have a real good time with him. So let's take a look at him. So you can see there's a short little RP, and then we're going to get right into pulling him. Again, freaking warlocks. So I just kind of take him in the beginning. I try to pull him off to the side of this room because I just want to make sure that there's plenty of room for this reckless leap to go out. So you can see you can't cancel it. So he picks up person, charges at them, and you can see all the swirlies get put down because he's basically breaking the ceiling and having everything collapse on you. All right, and then he does this intimidating shout, which if you're casting, it will interrupt your casting. So you want to be mindful of that. So kind of annoying for a boss fight to have that mechanic, but it is something casters and healers should be aware of. This rampage is your typical tank buster type mechanic. And that's really it for this boss. You can actually kind of play him in the middle of the room. We played him off to the side because whatever. The big thing is that if you're a melee or someone that's standing within the circles of who he targets first, and then he'll always come back to the tank, you want to do that. Now he does this Bellowing Roar, which brings out a bunch of additional mobs, and does a Blade Storm that fixates a player, and so that player is going to have to kite him out and get away from him in order to do that. I think the big thing, obviously, is you want to grab the Phantasmal Mystic and making sure that you're kicking that and interrupting that, and then doing your best to get everything brought over to this Axe Thrower. Now, unfortunately, the boss, right as the end of the Blade Storm came through, went there, and then he Blade Storms again, and our poor Devour Demon Hunter, well, not poor, he can cast on the move, but our Devour Demon Hunter caught the fixate both times. And that's really the mechanics. There's like a P1, P2. He'll go into the Blade Storm. That's kind of like the P2 where you want to kill all the adds and avoid the Blade Storm on the boss and get what damage you can off on him as you can. And then P1 is this right here where he does the leap, breaks the ceiling, puts all the dots on the ground, and then has the Intimidating Shout. Oh, Intimidating Shout. That's the other thing with this. Those purple circles, you actually want to stack up on that as much as you can. You need at least 2 people to stack up on each other, ideally more, but you know, depending on where your group's at, you just need 2 people to stack up, because if you don't stack up those circles and basically cancel out the shout, you will get feared. That's the Intimidating Shout on it. It doesn't interrupt casting. I apologize for misspeaking earlier. I forgot. I got my Intimidating Shout mechanics confused. This one, you want to make sure you're stacking those purple circles on top of each other so that you don't get feared. But that's Commander Kralik on the fight. Lots of hit points. He's going to be a fight that there's a lot of physical damage going out as a tank. I never really felt in danger from him. There were times like when he does his rampage where it can get a little spicy if I didn't time things like my Demon Spikes or my Fiery Brand up time as a Vengeance DH. But yeah, a little crazy. You can see here I had to run out to gather up on this, so I lost DPS up time, but it's not a big deal because he's not moving during that. But yeah, Commander Kralik, I think is one of the most fun bosses, and is definitely the most fun boss in this dungeon, and I think it's one of the most fun bosses across the 8 dungeons. I love this boss. It is so fun. Alright, and the good thing is much like Seat of the Triumvirate, once you kill Commander Kralik, you better have all your count because you're immediately going upstairs and taking on the Restless Heart. Now, the Restless Heart is a boss that has seen a lot of changes over the course of the beta cycle. This boss was ridiculously difficult early on, and now it's been put into a state that I think it feels a lot more fair. So we'll take a look at what this boss does, because there's a lot going on with this fight that, again, if you don't know what's going on, you're going to struggle with this. But if you, again, watch this video and have an idea of what to expect, then it'll be a little bit easier to manage. So on pull, you can see as I do most bosses in this dungeon, I pull it to the edge. And the first thing you're going to notice is this Arrow Rain ability coming down here. So this is going to basically spit out a bunch of white circles on the ground. that are going to put arrows on the ground, and you can see the arrows stick in the ground and they have little circles that are built around them. That's because if you collide with one of these arrows, you'll get knocked up into the air. So think of the mechanic that you had with the second boss of Vortex Pinnacle, that dragon boss, where you had to get knocked up to avoid the rings. You do the same thing. So it picks up target and does the bullseye wind blast, and you can see picks it, and then the ring comes out from the room. So what your goal is to do is to jump on one of the arrows so that you get knocked up over the ring, and then avoid the lightning that comes down afterwards, and it electrifies those arrows for a temporary amount of time. So it's like a combination of things like the Rick Reverb mechanic, where you want to jump those rings through the sound waves, and like the boss in Vortex Pinnacle. This is a mechanic that we've seen a few times in WoW's history, just done with now an arrow setup. Tempest Slash is a knockback for your tank, so just be mindful of that as you need to. As you can see, they get these circles around them now for this mechanic, and what they're going to do is they put them around the arrows that are electrified so that you can then remove those arrows from the playing field, and that's how you kind of maintain your space. So if you don't maintain your space well, you're going to be good there. Now this Bolt Gale that does, it targets a player, and it follows that player. So if you are targeted by that, just point it away from the rest of your group, probably defensive it just for safety. Restless Heart, that's really the fight. As you can see, picks a spot across the room. It's going to do the bullseye wind blast, and we're all going to be picking our arrow here to jump up. So you want to make sure that you're timing this as well as you can. Now, things like immunities, I think, do work on this. If you have like a bubble, is really the big one. I think Cloak of Shadows works on Rogue as well. But for everyone else, if you get hit by that ring, much like the ones in Streets of Wonder on Solia, not Solia, Soazme. The last boss of Streets, where if you got hit by those rings, you're basically dead. It's going to be the same idea here. So you want to make sure that you're doing that, and then making sure that you clear out the Tempest arrows as much as humanly possible. Now, if you don't put and the thing is, you have to overlap it with the arrows, not overlap it with the electric circles. You saw our one character tried to get these two at the same time and got neither of them. You always want to make sure that you're overlapping the arrow, because that's what actually gets removed. But that's the Restless Heart, and as you can see, as soon as we kill it, the darkness lifts, and we're back to the Windrunner Spire as we see it in the Isle of Keldon East, as in the zone itself. But that's Windrunner Spire. I think this dungeon is going to be a fan favorite from a lore and theme perspective. I do think mechanically the dungeon it's not my favorite. Particularly a lot of the trash is kind of annoying to deal with. I think this one and Seed of the Triumvirate are probably the two worst dungeons in terms of trash. Magister's Terrace is also pretty bad in my opinion. The bosses aren't bad, they're very straightforward to deal with, especially once you know what to do. So I think this dungeon is going to be fine. I think when Fortified starts to come into play, this dungeon may need to get some trash nerfed over time, especially as we start getting into the highest key levels and stuff like that. I think they're going to start to see some struggles on that front, because the trash in this dungeon is just, a lot of it's gross and has some pretty icky mechanics in my opinion. But the bosses are fine. I think the bosses on Tyrannical are going to present their own interesting challenges. I think Kralik, like I said, is one of the best bosses in the entire dungeon pool. I love the way his fight works out, because there's distinct yes and no's, kind of pass-fail type stuff to it, which for a dungeon boss, I love that sort of stuff. I hate pass-fail mechanics in raids, but I love them for dungeon bosses, because typically they only have like 2 mechanics. Kralik has like 4, which is awesome. But that's Windrunner Spire. You let me know what you think below in the comments. Remember to like, share, and subscribe this video and the entire Dungeon series video over to your friends and to your guilds that are looking to get a heads up and a leg up on what these dungeons do in Mythic Plus once the season kicks off on March 24th. So until the next video, I hope you all stay safe. Hope you enjoy yourself. You're having fun. You keep on gaming. We'll see you next time.